Well, good evening, everyone. I am Haley Ship, and I am the Communications Director with the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's the first webinar in our Rural Resilience series. We're grateful that you're taking the time to be here to learn alongside ranchers, partners, as well as community members from across the region. As I said, I am with the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance. For those of you that may be new, we go by the acronym RSA. And we are guided by a simple but pretty powerful idea, and that is that ranching, conservation, and communities all join together to make a winning team. It's all part of a three-legged stool. Our two main programs that we do at the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance are first off, conservation cost share programs. This is where we help ranchers financially in implementing practices on their properties that help both the ranch and the wildlife habitat. And then two, rancher-led education, and that's listening to ranchers and figuring out what they want to learn more about, and then finding the people to teach us those lessons. Now, this webinar series is a direct result of that process. Mary Oxart is also joining us on the call tonight. She's in the background. She's doing some tech support for us. She is RSA's Education Program Manager. We want to say thank you to our sponsors. Before we get started, we want to extend that sincere thank you. Their support makes webinars like this possible. That includes this year, VSETH Cattle Company, Stockman Bank, AgriBest Feeds, Montana Livestock Ag Credit, Merck and the Vents Virtual Fencing Company, and Ag Spire. We truly appreciate their commitment to ranching, stewardship, and rural resilience. Now, this is webinar number one in a four-part series. Still coming up, we're going to talk about cattle vaccination best practices, low-tech, high-tech restoration for ranch water systems, and what the beef industry can learn from the sheep industry. Since you signed up for today's webinar, you're automatically on the line for the rest of the series. You don't need to re-register. We're going to be sending you some reminder emails as each of those events rolls around. So with that, time for the main event. Here is how tonight's webinar is going to go out. First off, we're going to have Ryan Lankford with us. He's going to be talking about 701 tags. He's expanding that out a little bit more tonight. He's talking about general technology as well in agriculture and how he's incorporating that into his farm and his ranch. And then we're going to turn to Steve Kenyon and a discussion about seeding via drones. After the guys are done, we're going to have some time for you all to ask your questions. So make sure to keep a hold of those. We'll give you time to ask them in the chat at the end. And that's also, if you want to go ahead, if something pops into your brain, you can go ahead and put it into the chat. How we facilitate that is that I ask the questions of our speakers. That way we don't have a bunch of people trying to talk at the same time. So up first, Ryan Lankford. Ryan grew up on his family farm on the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation. After serving in the U.S. Army and earning a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, he returned home to continue his family's agricultural legacy. He's helped expand the family's operation to include Red Angus livestock and organic certified crops. And today he produces winter wheat, spring wheat, canola, peas, lentils, chickpeas, flax, and barley on more than 10,000 acres of leased tribal land. He also serves as a member of the Tribal Agriculture Expert Committee and has also represented producers for more than 7 years on both county and state farm service agency committees. So with that, we're going to toss it over to Ryan Lankford to get things started today.
All right, thanks, Haley. Can everybody hear me fine? You got me? Thumbs
Sounds
up?
good.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Alrighty, so yeah, I'm going to start off talking about agriculture and technology in ag. They contacted me and was like, you use these 701X GPS tags, but you also use a lot of technology. You mind coming on the RSA and talking a little bit about it? And so first thing I want to do is I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. So this kind of goes back to my Army thing. I was an instructor in the Army, so I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you. So three things, rule of three. So I'm going to start with the first one. What I'm going to tell you is I'm going to go through what is technology. I'm going to tell you why I use technology, the technology I've used, and then the 701X tags. So like any good tech guy, I start out with the definition of tech, and no better place to get it but then to ask Chat GPT. So that's the first place I went to, was right straight to the source. So technology. Chat tells me technology in agriculture refers to the use of tools, machines, scientific methods, and digital systems to improve agricultural efficiency, productivity, and sustainability. So here's where real tech comes in. Real tech comes in is I follow up with chat and I say, simplify that, chat. And so chat says, in simple terms, it means applying modern science and technology to ag. So that's the world we live in. We can get online, ask a question. If the question's too hard for us to understand, we can say, hey, simplify that a little bit. So then comes my simplification is what is technology and what is technology to me? I think technology to me is something new. Doesn't have to be new in the sense of, hey, I'm using satellites and doing all this fancy stuff. It means it's new to me. It's new to my operation. It's something new I haven't tried yet. It's something I want to try. That's technology. And why do we use technology? For me, there's one great big reason to use technology, and that's profitability. Profitability for me is really important, to make sure that I can afford to farm and ranch again next year. So that's a big, huge use of technology for me is profitability. The second most important thing, and maybe even the first, is time. Is this going to save me time? About I have a daughter that's 7 years old, and when she was born, my wife had an amniotic fluid embolism with her, and she just about died on the table. And so did my daughter. And so you realize how important time is and how precious it is. She's sneaking up here on my side while I'm talking about her. I'm on babysitting duty, so this is her. Um, Time's super important, and that's what I'm using technology for. Is how do I capture that time? How do I make it so it increases my efficiency? How do I increase my productivity? And how do I draw data out of that technology? And again, technology is a loose term I want to use. And as we go through this, I want you to know that there's different points of entry in technology. One of my first soirees in technology might have been when I first moved back to the farm, got out of the service, went through college, came back, and we're going to start firing up the truck. So we fire up a truck that hasn't moved for a while. I'm going to start hauling grain. Well, all the tires were bad on it. So what do? I change all the tires on that truck by hand. Use a cheater bar, take off all the tires, take them all off, put new ones on, get going, go down the road. First, I think it was about my second load in actually, get a flat tire. And I'm just like, really? It's like, I get a flat tire, just changed all these tires by hand. I pull up to the co-op and the kid comes out and he's like, well, back up and I'll change your tire. And so I back up and he grabs out a 1 inch impact gun. And so I even asked ChatGPT, when was the impact gun invented? 1932 is what it said. So this is 2008 about, and I back up and I watch technology go and take off a tire, which had taken me the last 2 days to change off all these tires by hand. So that's technology, right? So am I at the front of that technology or am I in the back of that technology? Because I don't have an impact gun. That's something new to me. I go home and I'm like, hey, why don't we have an impact gun in the shop? And my dad's like, we don't even own an air compressor big enough to run that impact, Ryan. You have to buy the air compressor first and then buy the impact gun. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I didn't have enough money, so put that in the budget for next year on that's my first technology investment. And that's a legit technology investment. I have to budget for it. I have to plan for it. I have to know that what I'm going to use it for and what that tool is going to do is that tool is going to save me some time. And so I've gone through and I primarily have done farming my whole life. I bought cows about 5 years ago, but the egg side, I'm really deep into technology. We started out with using GPSs on our sprayers. We were one of the first ones to use GPSs, and at that time it was just a little light bar. It would say green, you're on where you need to be. If it was red on this side, you turn this way and go that way until you got green, and then you'd stay straight. super dangerous because you're just watching the light bar and not seeing all the rock piles that are going by you, but you're just watching that green light. So that's the technology that was at the beginning of that. And we've always been kind of at the beginning of technology. I've always been at the forefront of it. Fast forward 20 some years later, now I have a self-propelled sprayer. I buy technology that is called Weed It, and it actually goes through and spot sprays just green weeds. So anything that's green, it's just spraying. It uses forward eyes and just individual sprays it. And I bought that about 2020-ish, right before COVID. And we installed it. And again, I was one of the first ones in the area to have that. So I was at the very forefront of this technology. And what I was hoping for was cost savings. And so luckily I got that on, got it implemented. It was a nightmare because there was no support really from it because I was one of the first ones there. But fast forward about another year and a half forward, um, everything shuts down. I was buying Roundup for $8 a gallon. It went to $50 a gallon. And if you could find it, but I had already had that technology in place. So I literally skated by 2 full years of watching Roundup in the 50s and high 30s. And I never had to buy it because I had that technology already in place. And then I'd have guys come up to me afterwards and say, well, why are you doing this? Or how are you doing this? And I'm like, well, this is how much it saved me before because I had it in place before. And it was a nightmare to put it in there. But it's where do you want to be on that technology curve? Do you want to be the guy who's pulling up to the co-op and looking at something that was invented in 1932? Or do you want to be the guy that's the first one down the road and dumping a lot of money on maybe a gamble? And I've been on both sides of that, right? I've been on the 1932 and I've been on hitting one out of the park. So that moves us into the cattle industry and where I'm at in the cattle industry. Um, I I use a lot of H2A workers, so migrant workers that come from South Africa. I am working with my dad and my family, but primarily for boots on the ground, a lot of it's me and my South Africans. And so my changeover is constant. I'm getting new guys in all the time. Even this last fall when we preg tested, my vet comes out and he's like, "Who are we working with today?" And I was like, "Well, it's going to be a crew." And he's like, "It always is, right?" And I'm like, it is. Well, I had two guys that literally had never seen a cow before. That was their first time working. And so for me, getting into the cattle business is a real challenge because there's some things that we have to know and we have to understand, and technology can't necessarily fill those gaps. And so as I go through stuff and develop a plan on how technology can help me, I'm looking to different avenues, and the 701X is one of those things. And stepping back for me, it's about managing guys that are going in a lot of different directions and managing them from afar. And one thing, having 4 kids, is I know that a lot of life is lived off of a farm and off of the ranch, and that's one thing that I was missing. I was missing a lot of my child's and my kids' life. And you don't realize that until you go through a life lesson and somebody says, hey, guess what? There's more important things than more acres and more money and more cows. You got one chance at this. And how do you free up your time? And what I've been exposed to on the egg side is the ability to look at my phone, and I have Starlink in all of my John Deere equipment. So I can open up my phone and I can look at exactly where somebody's at. I can look at all my guys and say, this is what they're doing. He's in this sprayer, he's in this tractor. Watch what they're doing. I can monitor it because it's using satellites, and I can link it to my phone. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to see what was out there to do that on the cattle side, because I'm limited and trying to limit my time about how much time I spend in what sectors. And the hard part with cows is they're they're a living animal, and you have to keep a maintenance on them. They're not like a tractor or anything else where you can just be like, I'm going to park it over there, call the guy, and they're going to come fix this when they get a chance. So this technology, I thought, what can I use it for? And I think that's a big thing when we look at technology is what technology is out there and how can you use it on your place? What are you after? This 701X, I'm going to share my screen with you and kind of show you what it looks like. Um, Sorry, bear with me. Okay. Is that good? Can you guys see?
Sure can.
Okay, perfect. So the 701X is a GPS tag. That's it in full view there. It's a little white tag that goes in the ear of the animal. It has a solar panel on the back, and it utilizes satellite and um, cellular connectivity to report back to the base station or back to the internet, and tell you the location of that animal. It gives you a lot of other things too. Um, and again, when we look at technology, it's going to be what parts of the technology can you use? What parts of the technology are going to be useful to you? And so my big goals off of this technology were going to be, one is, this is my son, was how is this going to impact the next generation? Where am I at on this curve? And I had my son stand there and I was like, I took a picture of him. I said, Clyde, I want to take a picture of you because someday you might be telling your kids, oh yeah, my crazy dad, we were one of the first ones to have GPS tags on our cows, and this was it. I was 11 years old. And so we're at the, what I believe is I'm at the forward end of this curve. And I've been at the forward end of a lot of different curves on technology. Even this last year, I have a combine, brand new combine, and the technology in that is amazing. It's, well, you spend a bunch of money, you'd be amazed what kind of technology is there and what it's supposed to do. But this year we had a harvest that was unlike any other. I've had a couple of them where we've got rains throughout harvest, and not a good thing when you're trying to cut wheat. And so I have this great big shiny technology suite of package in this combine, and it's not working. John Deere comes in, they send in all the guys, they come in with a tech and then a regional tech and everything else. And I'm like, this isn't working. I've cut in a combine for 30 years. I know what it's supposed to do, and it's not doing it. And the John Deere rep, he's like, well, you're paying for this technology. We should get it right and we should use it. And I was like, yeah, but if it rains again, I'm going to lose a bunch of money. How do I shut this technology off? And they were just in awe because I'm like, I'm shutting it off. How do I shut this off? Because I know what I need to do and I know how this combine's supposed to act. I need the technology to leave so I can do what I know has to be done. And so that's a prime example of knowing what needs to be done and having the tools and what you're going to use them for. And when we're talking about these 701X tools, I'm looking at things that I know I should be doing, but I'm trying to fill in the gap. And so one of the big things is I'm trying to fill in the gap of where they're at. So this is a really interesting to me is they'll track where that animal is at. This year I got 20 tags, and I put 5 tags on cows and the rest on bulls. And so this is a off of their website, but it kind of shows you what it can do is when a tagged animal leaves a fence. And so you go through, you map your fences, and you do that. Either you can have them do it or you could do it and do it on your computer, go through and map your fences, your boundaries. And once that animal leaves the fence, it'll report to you and give you an alert on your phone and say, hey, this animal's outside the fence. You won't be able to track it minute by minute. What I have found is that once they leave the fence, it's usually pretty fast about them reporting that they're out of the fence. But after that, it's not like you can really track them minute by minute and see where they're going. But it will report to you that they're out of the fence. And then mine are reporting about once a day. They sweep and they tell you where they're at. It'll download it. When it downloads it, it'll show you where it has gone in the last day, and it will show you like these little tracks about where it's gone in the last day. But it typically reports about once a day. So that was a big thing to me, was how do I find where these animals are at if they're leaving the fence, or it also gives you health updates. It also gives you maps about where they've been grazing. And so I've used, this is the other thing that I've really used a lot, is basically a heat map to see where they're grazing at in the pasture, where they're hitting it hard, if they're moving around, if I need to move salt, if I need to move minerals, where they're at right now, and try to utilize the grass as best as I can by utilizing minerals and salt to pull them into different locations. Um, and so those are two of the things. The third thing that I think is pretty interesting about it is the breeding insights that it does. So it actually uses the tag, and it will sense when a bull is breeding. So it will sense when they're breeding, how many times a day they're breeding, if they're lame. So like this year, I had one bull that went lame on me. What I assume happened was, I assumed that it was in a fight and probably fell into a badger hole and went lame on me. And it called me. It called me that day and was like, "Hey, this bull hasn't moved, low activity." And so we went out that day and checked on it. And sure enough, there it was laying down. We got it up. You could tell that it was walking slow. We pulled it out, loaded it up, brought it home, and then returned it back. We actually put it back in with some heifers later on. But that was pretty amazing to see. Like, it was telling me that that bull wasn't moving. Again, being on the front end of this technology, there's good things and bad things. The bad things it's developing. It's there's a lot of things that they're saying it's supposed to do that it's not. I wish that it would report faster. It doesn't. But again, you have to realize what the tools are at and where you are at in that technology. Are you buying old technology and it's new to you, or are you buying new technology that's still developing? I feel like this stuff is still developing. And so I'm okay with there's some glitches to it and everything else like that, because I want to be on the forefront because it's going to help me. And one of the biggest things for me is being able to leave the farm. This year, prime example for me is my my nephew made it to the state championship football game in for high school in Nevada. And so it was over Thanksgiving, and our cows were down grazing some stubble. And I looked at the forecast and I was like, man, there's supposed to be a winter storm coming right when I'm going to leave. So I'm going to bring these cows home. So I brought the cows home, and I have a South African that has never seen snow. He was one of the first ones. This is his first time around cows. And so I'm like, Martin, I was like, we're going to bring these cows home. We're going to trail them home. It's nice out. I'm going to leave for a week. I was like, we're going to cake these and make sure they know where home is at. We're going to feed them, but I want you to cake them every day so they know where you're at and you can keep track of them. And so we brought them home. I left on my trip. I'm gone for 3-4 days. The storm hits. We're right next to a pasture of our tribe's buffalo. The buffalo come through. They pick up my herd and they just drift. And I didn't know it because when I left, the technology side of this, you have to change your location of when you move your cows, and you have to put them in a new fence, and you have to do all this stuff on the app. And where we moved them to, I hadn't had mapped yet. And I just shut off my notifications because I was like, they should be staying there. They'll be all right. He's caking them. They're feeding them. So I shut off my notifications, left, and talked to my hired man. And he's like, I said, how's it going? He's like, well, not good. He's like, we lost the cows. And I'm like, oh no. It was like a couple of them. He's like, no, there's some here. I'm looking for them. I was like, okay, well, where are you looking for them at? Where are you doing? And so I called my dad right away and I'm like, what's going on? He's like, well, I thought that he talked to you yesterday. He's like, yeah, all the cows are gone. except for some of them. I was like, what's some of them? He's like, 10. We have 10 cows. I was like, so we're missing a whole herd of cows. Yep, we're missing a whole herd. Well, Martin, again, this is what I'm dealing with. He had never driven in snow, never seen snow. He's going out and going into, my dad was like, he's going into every coulee and getting stuck in every drift he can. And so we're not able to find these cows. We don't know where they're at. I was in Vegas watching football, looked on my phone, and I could see where they pinged. And I was like, I sent the coordinates, dropped a pin, gave it to Martin. I said, this is where they're at. They're 12 miles from you. This is where they're at. And about 20 minutes later, he called me. He said, yep, that's right where they're at. He's like, I I can't believe that I didn't call you earlier. And so right there, that technology to me let me go somewhere, let me leave, let me do something that I normally wouldn't have done. I mean, to be honest, that's the first time I've ever watched my nephew play football, and he's going to be a senior next year. And my sister has asked me every year to go, and I've always found an excuse of not to go. And so this was the first year I get to go, and sure enough, something happens. But that's the tools that we have, and that's the ability that this program um, is able to do. Now, I want to just kind of end this on a note: is you have to know your tools, and you have to know the people you're dealing with and what your capability is. We talk about that. I started out with that impact gun and the technology of it. So we all kind of know this saying, right? Righty tighty, lefty loosey. Now, looking at the technology of that impact, I have these South Africans that are here. This year, I decided to go buy a cattle pot that the guy who usually hauls my cattle, he was going to upgrade his. So I buy his old cattle pot, and I'm like, well, it's like this cattle pot's 40 years old and looks like some of the tires are that old as well. We'll change all the tires off of this because we're going to put $200,000 worth of cabs in this thing. We probably afford to put some new tires on it, right? So I have my guys take the tires off, and I'm watching them. I go out, go inside the shop, come outside the shop, and they're on the left-hand side and for the better part of an hour. And I'm like, what's going on? And they were using technology. Now we have electric impacts that are way better than the 1 inch gun because they're lighter, they're better, they don't weigh as much, maybe not as much torque. And so they're trying to take these tires off. And I'm like, well, screw that. The battery must be dead. They don't have enough oomph. Go get that 1 inch gun, drag out the hose, and knock these off. So they drag out the hose, and they're sitting there chattering on it. And this is an old Bud wheel trailer. So that means on the one side, they're righty tighty, lefty loosey. On the other side, they're righty loosey, lefty tighty. They're reverse threads. So now that kind of leads me into the point where no matter what technology you have to rely on somebody who knows something about it. I reach down, hit the reverse button. The guy looks at me. He's like, that's reverse. I was like, yeah, you're on the wrong side. I was like, try it. Vroom, vroom. Off comes the lug nuts. And so just like that, that technology that was rendered useless because you didn't know how to operate it is now good again. So that's one thing that I wanted to convey to you guys is that I don't think there's a silver bullet out there so that we can just leave and go and manage from afar. But there's tools that we can use. This is maybe one of them. I don't know if it's the tool that I'm going to end up using forever, but it has helped me so far. And it's just a matter of how we utilize technology. I'm going to stop there. I don't know how I'm doing on time. I try to look. I think I'm kind of close. Haley, is that good?
Yep, that's perfect, Ryan. So I know that there's going to be questions for what Ryan brought up, and for sure, keep those. If you want to, you can drop them into the chat right now. We'll bring them back for Ryan once Steve is done talking. But fun stuff. I think every ranch needs to come with a user's manual for absolutely every task that we do, but we'd have to hire another person just to put that together. So we'll go on to our next speaker now, which is Steve Kenyon. Steve owns a custom grazing business in Alberta, Canada, that's under the name of Greener Pastures Ranching Ltd. By using extended grazing techniques, Steve is able to pasture cattle year-round, and this is done by using a combination of intensive cell grazing, dormant season grazing, swath grazing, crop residue grazing, and bale grazing. Steve has been teaching sustainable grazing management for more than 20 years and has been a keynote speaker at many conferences and seminars throughout Canada and the United States, and even into Europe. Now, Steve has a very energetic personality, you'll get that, which complements a very down-to-earth, common sense approach to farm business management. Yet he is still just a producer and presents in a very honest and straightforward style. The mission statement of Greener Pastures is economic and environmental sustainability for generations. It's important to provide an enjoyable, profitable, and sustainable business for future generations. And with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Steve for the second portion of tonight.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I was happy that Ryan had his daughter on here today because I am also have a toddler in the background here. That next generation who at 16 months was actually holding fence staples for me. So I'm quite happy that I'm not the only one on Daddy Daycare today. I'm going to start my presentation. Oh, we got something overlapping. Okay, there we go. You can see that?
We sure can, Steve.
Perfect, perfect. All right. Well, I'm going to be kind of the opposite in a way. I am actually usually the last one to take on new technology, new ideas, new techniques. You bet. I'm an innovator. I'm a early adopter of those for sure. But equipment, I like my old stuff. Um, this is my bale truck, and I'm pretty happy to say that I still got a Chris Ledoux cassette tape that plays in it. Pretty happy about that. Actually, three of my vehicles have cassette players in them. So um, I am been ranching now for 30 years, and I've never even owned a tractor. So that's something that a lot of people can't fathom. I use bale trucks quite a bit. And now that being said, I've had quite a few trackers. If anybody knows what a tracker is, it's actually this is a Geo tracker. It was made by Chevy. I've had quite a few of them over the years. This is a Sidekick Suzuki, same thing. They're both the same vehicles. So um, that thing has an 8,000 pound winch on the front of it. I could pull myself up a tree if I wanted to. But very simple to repair, very easy maintenance. Some of the older equipment, I like it because it's simple and my mechanics, I still got a mechanic that understands them. So that's a big part to it. A lot of the newer stuff, it just frustrates me because it's too fancy. Uh, that being said, I'm not going to lie to you. I do have a tractor on the farm, but it doesn't do a lot of work for me. This is in the back of one of my quarters, so I do have a tractor there. Um, I did buy a backhoe a few years ago. It is more useful to me than a tractor because I do a lot of riparian area work and water sites, building dams and things like that. So a backhoe is very handy. However, it's not very modern either. It was in 1981. But it still works and it still runs for what I need to. So I'm pretty happy with that. However, it has a very unique, very modern technology on it. I say that it's self-lubricating, and some of you farmers with old equipment might understand what I mean by that. um, so I do have a little bit of equipment on the farm, but a few years ago, I got kind of brave, I guess, and I bought a little drone. Um, and I kind of got the hang of it. It was kind of complicated to figure it out. I'm not I need my kids to teach me how to run my cell phone. And every time they complain that they have to teach me how to run my cell phone, I remind them that I taught them how to operate a toilet. So then they usually help me pretty easy. So, but I bought this drone and I struggled to figure it out, and now I got the hang of it pretty good. And I bought a little drone for video. Originally, it was to do some promotion, social media, make some videos, do a little bit of promotion that way. And then I found it's also a tool to be able to go look at things without having to drive to it. So I basically, I can check water sites, I can check fences. As long as I'm line of sight from the road or from the gate, I can fly in and check quite a few things. If I start going down, which there is a zoom feature on it too, then I lose. If I lose line of sight, then it loses contact with my controller. But I can go, as you see here, I'll go down pretty close, just checking a water system here. And a lot of my land is so rough that it's so much nicer to fly in than it is to drive in and check things. Now, if there's a problem, obviously I got to go in, but just checking a water system here. So by the way, the little one's name is Sid. I name all my equipment basically. So I can get right down pretty close in some places. Like I said, as long as there's not too many trees in the way. So I got to park in the right spot and I can usually see just whatever. Um, you guys have always, wondered if you got remembered to close that back gate, right? Before you turn cattle in. So that's what I do too. I'm like, did I close that gate? Well, I can zip up with my drone, zip over a half a mile and double check, make sure that gate's closed before I turn cattle in. Keep an eye on my employees, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to. Yeah, they hear the drone from pretty quick though when it comes flying over. But yeah, mostly it was for video work, promotions, and does a great job. This is a DJI Mini Pro 3 I have. Now they have a Mini Pro 4, and I think the 5 has come out now too. But it's got 4K video, high enough quality for any of the videos that I'm making. So pretty happy with the little drone, that's for sure. Made some pretty neat videos, I guess, over the years. I don't know if that sound is coming through, but I'm going to turn it down a little bit. We don't need all the music. So I've been able to make videos for presentations or to send to people. This was actually one I took over to Europe. We were going to Estonia. I was speaking. Something's wrong with my video on my side, but and I needed to explain how bale grazing worked, and I wasn't sure we were going to all be speaking the same language because we had an interpreter. So yeah, I just made a quick video that described bale grazing for them with no audio at all. Then we got into winter, showing the electric fence. We're using a bipolar fencer, and then the actual grazing. So you can sure see things a lot better with the aerial view. When you first get started, you got to be very careful on your turns because if you turn too quick, the video looks choppy. So you have to do nice slow movements and you take hours and hours of videos to get a short little clip that works in a video. So, so then I got a little bit braver. I had an opportunity come up that I could buy a seeding drone. So I actually bought the DJI T10, which at the time was newer, I guess. Wasn't the newest one out there because the T10 stands for the 10-liter tank if you're spraying. They had a T20, a T30, and they just come out with a T40. So it's the smallest one that I could get that we could seed pastures with. And it was small enough in Canada, you only needed a basic license to fly it because it was under 25 kilograms. So it carries, the tank says on it, it carries 6 kilograms, which in US terms, I can get between, depending on the seed, probably 10 to 22 pounds of seed in it. If it's small, 10 pounds would be light and fluffy grass seeds. And if it was all legumes, I can probably get 22 pounds. But I used to seed with this old truck or the quad, right? I got this quad mounted spreader I could put out there driving back and forth. I've got some pretty rough land. So it was hard on equipment, hard on my back. Last time I rented this Valmar for a few years, the last time I rented it, I broke both arms off it. So the rental cost was cheap, but the welding charge after was quite expensive. So my land is pretty rough. And you guys all know how the GPS on these things is you're aiming for the dark fence post or the spruce tree in the trees. Yeah, you're not very straight. And by this picture, you can see you can't always go very straight with those. Makes the neighbors talk though. This is right over top of the Highway 651, and this is a hill, so you can see every miss on that field. And I did it 5 years ago, so I still get neighbors talking about this one. But now that I have the drone, no more of that aiming for a fence post. It's GPS controlled. It's got radar on it. So if there's an obstacle in there that I didn't happen to see, it'll stop. So as long as I let him do the work, um, then yeah, I don't ever crash it. The only time I've ever crashed this drone is when I've actually taken control of it. And yeah, then it's my mistake because yeah, I'm not as good as Sam is flying for sure. But basically, the yellow is the plan, and green is what we've already seeded. So I basically draw the waypoints around the outside of the field. I look, hey, Emily, here. I draw the waypoints around the outside, and then I hit yes, and then it draws its lines for me. And if I don't like going east and west, I can go north and south, and I can adjust that however I want. But then once I hit go, he just does it. He does all the work for me. He does all the flying. If he gets low on battery or low on seed, I bring him home, which is wherever I happen to be parked. He lands. I can change the battery, add to the seed tank, and he's gone again. I time my pit stop. I'm about 2 minutes usually, so it's not very long. He's on the ground. Downside is the batteries only last about 8 minutes in the air. So I need to be pretty close to this thing. So on a pasture and I can follow along with it. I'd like to be in the middle of the field and I follow along with it. I can go pretty quick. If I've got to do a grain field and it's a seeded field, well, then I got to stay on the edge. Now I'm flying all the way across and there's a lot of empty fly time that way. Depends when you run out of seed. So much better on a pasture because of that short fly time. But normally I can seed about 15 acres an hour, plus or minus, depending on the situation. So it's still reasonably quick. And again, I said it's the smallest one you can buy that you can seed with. And actually, you can't buy this one anymore. It's already obsolete, I was told. Might have start having troubles getting parts already. And I only bought it, 2.5 years ago. So that's what he looks like. That's a seed tank and the spreader unit is underneath. So when you buy it, it comes with a sprayer tank. You can see the 4 nozzles underneath the propellers for spraying. I have never sprayed. I've had lots of people ask me to spray, but I won't. Chemical anyway. I'm not a big fan of chemical. I haven't had chemical on my farm for 30 years. Why would I start now? But even for somebody else, when I'm done a day of seeding, right? When I'm out seeding legumes, I'm covered in dust at the end of the day. Like I come home, I need a shower. I'm covered. I got to be underneath this thing. Like I got to be close to it to be able to run it. I'm not going to spray chemicals and I'm standing underneath this thing. So that'd be a warning if anybody wants to try and do this. You're kind of close to it, right? If I'm in spraying with a tractor, I'm in a closed cab most of the time. Yeah, I'm not going to be spraying chemicals out of this. Now, maybe some biologicals or something sometime, but I haven't yet. But I do have the ability to do that, I guess. So the basic components, this drone cost me about $17,000 for the drone. There's 2 chargers. They're the big gray things there are chargers. I got 5 batteries running. They told me I should be able to do it with 3, but I needed 5 because it was stopping me. It takes 16 minutes to charge and 8 minutes to kill a battery. So that's why I need 5 on rotation. And I've got that's the smallest generator that I could buy that could actually power those 2 things. And I had to run it off both circuits because if I put one on one circuit on that generator, it would blow the breaker. So I had to get an adapter to utilize the 30 amp plug as well. But yeah, I can basically seed 24/7 just because I keep rotating batteries around. I think I looked at my batteries here a while ago and I have a little over 1,500 hours on the drone itself. So because the batteries keep track of the time for me. So I've seeded quite a few acres with this thing. And just a comparison of the big drone and the little drone. This is kind of the view. There's a camera on the front and the back of the big drone as well. It's not as good of a camera by any means as the little one, but it allows me to see where I'm flying and what's going on. So if I'm going one direction, I can see, oh, there's some trees coming up. If they're in my path or there's one that I didn't see when I programmed it, I can actually, as I'm going, just raise him up without changing his flight pattern at all. get over top of that tree and then come down. So I definitely need the camera to be able to do that. He flies at night. Pretty cool. It gets darker and darker in this video. He lights up like a Christmas tree. Red and green flashing. In the daytime, he's actually hard to see because he blends in with the background right in the trees. And he's on, he's half a quarter away from me. And it's pretty hard to see where he is. But at night, you can see no problem. In a way, I actually prefer flying at night because he's so much easier to see. I remember one night I was flying out there about midnight. I was trying to get a job done right along the highway, and the landowner got I think he said 17 phone calls that night about what's going on. As long as I can see the field before it's dark, right? Go take a quick drive around, see any obstacles or telephone lines or power poles. You gotta be able to know where those are because they're hard to see on the GPS. And we can make some using the little drone to make some cool videos. This is just kind of an advertising I made. So this is kind of both of them, right? The little drone watching the big drone fly.
Quality, plush, productive forage stands.
So I did not make this video. I hired a guy to do it. So he's got a little better quality, but it's all my videos still. I just sent him the footage.
To nourish the soil. For all your custom seeding needs, contact Greener Pastures Ranching today. Planting polycultures. Imagine the possibilities.
So that's kind of I wanted to keep this quick so that you guys can ask a lot of questions. I guess the reason why I'm doing it, why am I out there seeding with this? I don't use much other equipment. I want a polyculture. To me, I need a polyculture of plants that gets me a polyculture of root systems, which gets me a polyculture of biology. And that soil biology is so important. So that's why I'm putting those extra legumes out, any extra, get some creeping grasses out there to try and increase on new land and on land maybe after a drought. In my environment, clovers do really well. So I got various types of clovers in my mix. But after a severe drought, my clovers all die out. So I've just learned that, okay, it's a severe drought. Let's go back out and top dress with some legumes and kick everything back into gear. Just kind of how our system works up here. So that's why I'm doing it, is because I want biology. I'm trying to get different, put in annuals and perennials and creeping roots, tap roots, bunch grasses, creeping grasses, you name it. I want a mixture of everything. And it's all to get the critters coming in. So figured I'm not going to go into my insect talk right now by any means, but that's the reason I'm doing this. It's not just necessarily to get more production. It's also to get better biology and get the whole system working better. So, all right, I'm quick. I was going to leave lots of room for questions, I think.
Steve, I'm sorry if I missed it, but did you tell us why it was named Sam? Was that just the name that you felt like you were pulled to?
Yeah, just random. All my vehicles have names. So Sam is the drone. Sally is actually the controller. Because Sally always tells Sam what to do, and he listens very well. He's very well trained. So, yeah,
That makes sense.
Yeah, all my equipment has names too. So, yeah.
I have a new policy at our ranch, and that's that our outside barn cats have to be around for a year before they actually get a name that's not Bob. Every barn cat is Bob until it's been around for a year and proven that they can stick around. So I finally got two new cats that are with new names. So
Not
I
Bobs.
understand. They've surpassed the Bob. Well, we've got a couple of questions I know up here for both Steve as well as for Ryan. And so we'll all three get on here and we'll kind of start to fire some of these at you guys. But again, for the folks that are listening, if you've got a question, go ahead and drop it into the chat and we'll make sure to ask it of Steve and Ryan. And I like that you all are kind of on opposite ends of this tech discussion. And so I'm going to ask the same question sort of in a different way. And first off to you, Ryan, as you're looking at adopting, it seems like a new technology every season, you're kind of thirsty for this. How are you IDing the technologies that you want to trial? Are things just getting advertised to you? Are you seeking these out? What are some of the sources that you go to?
No, for me, I go to a lot of webinars like this or a lot of field days, and what I've really developed myself is what tools I think I can use on my place. I've been to a lot of places that are like, this is the only way to do this. Here's what I do, and it's all the right things. And kudos to those guys that have so much confidence in what they're doing, especially product guys, like whether they're selling green or red or whatever, like that's the best. But what I do is I pick out in my mind, what can I use that and what does it give to me? And so that's kind of how I run things through my process is I just pick and say, okay, how will that help me? Can I use it on my farm? How much do I want to go into it? Even like the 701X tags, there's so much more that you could do. I'm not giving it justice of all the things they have developed. I'm just using it for the three things that I have time to put into it because I'm the righty tighty lefty loosey guy. I know what I want out of it, and that's what I'm going to get out of it. So that's kind of how I run things through my process of recruiting new technology. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I don't get hung up on trying to make things work. And I kind of move on.
So, Steve, then the flip side of it with the use of your drone, when you said you're the one that doesn't typically adopt technology, why was that piece of equipment something that you decided this is the one I'm gonna take a bite of?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was wanting to promote social media a bit, right? Because of my mentorship, educational side of my business, I wanted to get it going. So thought the videos and things like that would be a good idea. And once I got the hang of it, it was easy, right? I mean, it was it's like playing a video game, basically flying it, right? It's not that difficult to fly. Understanding the controller, like I said, getting the hang of your cell phone is about the same, right? You just got to keep trying and keep poking buttons until something works, and then you figure it out. There's still stuff on it that I probably don't understand how to use it, but I can get done what I want to get done. It can actually track a person or equipment as well. Like I can set that little drone up to follow me. Wherever I walk, it just follows me and keeps me in sight. So it's kind of neat to be able to walk through the crowd and the herd of cattle, and it just follows me. Once in a while, it gets confused. It mistakes me for a cow or something, I think. But I always thought it'd be neat to follow a cow through the herd as you did a cattle drive or something, right? Pick out the pretty cow and lock it on. But the drones are designed or programmed not to follow animals. It can recognize an animal versus equipment versus a person. And I guess it's so that nobody chases wildlife with them, is my guess. But yeah, I couldn't follow my dog or I couldn't follow my any of my cattle. So it struggled actually following my backhoe because it didn't like it. So the hoe out the back, it didn't recognize it as a vehicle, and it would argue with me that it didn't want to follow it. So yeah.
As we're talking about the drones too, I do want to make a little plug. We have a podcast, the Ranch Stewards Podcast. It's available on YouTube as well as on all major podcast platforms. But our February episode is going to be on selecting drones. And I'm definitely not the person to discuss the discrepancies that there are between the US and Canada. Steve, of course, is based in Alberta. There are differences in laws and such when you get into what country you're in, as well as where you're flying over. If you're in the United States, if you're flying, especially over a federal property, you have to have certain types of drones. And so we'll get into some of those intricacies in that podcast as well. Ryan, we did have a lot of questions as far as what do these 701X tags cost? And how does that compare to virtual fencing? I found an article that Drovers had done that was last year, and it compared the four main virtual fencing companies and kind of looked at some of their costs. They've got a nice fence comparison. And a lot of the virtual fence companies, you have a lot of startup cost because they have base stations that those callers go back to. That's not always the case because some people are in an area that has good enough cell phone coverage or good enough internet coverage that they can beam off of that, which is what your tags are doing. If I'm correct, they're beaming off of something else. But oftentimes the virtual fences have a high setup charge because of base stations that are needed. But I guess speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah. So I did look at vents and actually chased down vents quite a bit. Actually got to talk to some of their developers and stuff like that. Really interesting about the technology and everything that's going on to that. Um, I I shied away from it because of the cost. I guess I'm running my cows separate from my farming, and so I'm trying to keep my input costs really low on them because I'm trying not to borrow money off of on my cows, and so that was a big thing. And at the current point, I thought, well, I don't have really great big pastures. Everything's pretty much in a fence. And I'm like, well, I don't really even need to divide stuff up in my mind. I'm like, I just move it from one paddock to another paddock. So I really didn't see the necessity of having the vents. Um, and then the reason I went with the 701 product I saw in the chat there too, there was a couple different options. And this kind of speaks to everything that I kind of look at is where's the support? Where are you going to get help? Are they willing to fight through it with you? And especially these new companies. So 701X, my alma mater at MSU in Bozeman, I went down and gave a talk down there and saw them. They had just the research starting out. And so I talked to the research, the guys, the engineering students that were doing it down there, kind of felt them out for a bit. And then a couple of years later, I actually got one. And I kind of knew that I'd have a good baseline of if I did have issues or if they wanted to call me and give me questions. There was that kind of open communication. So that's kind of why I went with them. But I do think the cost is pretty cheap. It's about $175. You buy the tag and the first year subscription. So the tag's actually like $100, $75 for the subscription. Then after that, it's $75 a year, just for the one tag. So.
And then Ryan, if I'm remembering correctly, Ryan had hosted a field day at his place last summer, but you had the tags that you paid that fee for, but then you also could do tags that you didn't have to pay an annual fee for that would balance off of those tags.
Yep. So you can run these like they're called elites, which are like a multiplier. So they're actually other slave tags that will use the one tag that you're paying the fee for, the $75. You can put up to like 10 tags and they'll link up to it via Bluetooth and then send out. So I'm actually tracking about 10 times as many cows off of one tag. And so it does bring down the cost. The bad part with the elite ones, like if they leave the fence, they're not going to alert you right away, but it will help you develop your heat maps on your grazing and stuff like that. So it's another tool about how you want to use it.
And then you chose to use it on your bulls, and you said, I believe, 5 cows. How did you determine which animals you were going to tag?
When I talked to 701X, they kind of strongly suggested the bulls because they're really trying to develop the mounting and the breeding cycle of it. And I can see where that is a lot of good, useful information. I guess one thing I didn't really talk about was the data that we get. The hard part about technology is sometimes we get so much data we don't know what to do with it. And that's a problem, right? Like we get so much data, we can't make actionable decisions upon it. And I kind of wanted to have some more data on the bulls. I mean, I know that when I was young and grew up watching my grandpa, I mean, he knew every cow on his place and knew everything about it. And I knew that I just wouldn't have that kind of time to allocate towards my bulls. And so I wanted to be able to get some data and say, okay, well, this is what's showing up or not. And I think that's why I went with the bulls. And plus, they're really high priced compared to a cow. And so I wanted to secure them and make sure that if they were going to take off on me, I could track them down.
Couple of the comments in the chat here. Cody says 701 is based out of North Dakota. 701 is
Yep.
the area code, so that's where it came from. Parker had asked if 701 allows you to create boundaries and keep them in, or if it's just a tracking tag, and it is just the tracking tag. It doesn't have any mechanism that's keeping them within a boundary.
Nope. Yeah, it's just a tracking. So if they leave the boundary, it'll alert you to say, hey, they're outside of the boundary. And yeah, they are based out of North Dakota. They just did research development through Montana State University.
All right, Steve, we're going to go ahead and put you back on the hot seat. I'm letting you guys talk toggle kids tonight. We appreciate this. Both me and Mary have kids as well, so it's fun to see some dads on kid duty as well during these things. But we had a question for you of what's the best time of year to seed using the drone, and what kind of seeding rate do you generally use? Then what are the things to consider to increase the chances of getting an established seeding?
Mm. Okay, so yeah, I've done a lot of broadcasting, so this is really with any type of broadcasting seed on pasture, not necessarily with a drone. The drone is just easier on my back and more precise. But basically, I have four different ways of broadcasting seed. I will frost seed is my number one. That means in the springtime when the snow is melted, but it is thawing during the day and freezing at night. Okay, so there's that freeze thaw action. If you can get the seed on the ground, then it almost seeds itself. It causes seed to soil contact. Now, this is with legumes mostly. They're not going to germinate right away, but if you can get them in the ground, right, actually that seed to soil contact, you'll a lot better luck at getting germination. So number one, I'll do that in the spring. Downside, very small window most years, right? If you're busy that week when it's doing that and you didn't get out there and get your seeding done, then it's, you missed your opportunity. So the second way that I'll do that is I'll do the same thing, but I'll do it in the fall. So I'll wait till after the growing season stopped. So up here, we're pretty safe. Once it freezes pretty hard, our winters are like, we're blessed with, 6 to 7 months of frozen tundra up here. So, it's frozen. If you're in a warmer climate and you're going to get that freeze thaw and all of a sudden you get a warm spell and it warms up and things germinate, that's not a good thing. So that fall seeding works for me. And then what happens is it just sits under the snow all winter, and then in the spring you get that freeze thaw action. But I can get a lot more acres done in the fall, right? I can do thousands of acres in the fall. In the spring, not so much. I don't have enough time during that period. Third way, in front of the herd. So if you've got your own seeding equipment, right, it's really hard to do it on a custom basis. But if you are doing a rotational grazing system and you've got a big herd, increase your stock density and seed right before you go onto those paddocks. So I don't have to do the whole property like that. But if I've got one paddock or a couple paddocks that I know need some attention, need some more diversity out there, I can go out and seed a couple days before the herd gets there. And then we stomp them into the ground, right? We increase our stock density, get it as high as we can, and stomp it to the ground. Fourth way, if you believe your weatherman and there's a big rainstorm coming, right? Nothing makes it germinate like a rainstorm. So if there's a big storm coming and they're predicting 3 to 4 inches of rain, get some seed out on that ground because that will pound it into the ground. Now, does it always work? No. Some years I've seeded and I've seen nothing. Sometimes I've seen it come up months later. Good example was sometimes months later and sometimes years later. Good example was actually I seeded a bunch of land in 2023. Nothing came up. I didn't see anything. This year in 2025, we had 3 inches of rain and hail. It hit in 30 minutes. It just pounded, and we had hail. We had snowbanks that came off on the steps, off the roof, and of these little hail storm. And in August, my dog couldn't run through the clover. Right, it was 2 years after I seeded it. We just took the right growing conditions, and it popped. So I've seen seeds come up like 7 years later. I remember we seeded some sweet clover one year. Sweet clover, white clover, and red clover I think was in the mix. And like 7 years later, I saw where the quad was driving because the sweet clover was up. The kid that I had hired to do it, I told him to seed every 15 feet because that's how far the spreader is going to spread, right? Well, he was mistaken because I saw sweet clover every 50 feet. There was huge gaps between the sweet clover. So yeah, I think it was at least 7 years later. So it doesn't always work, but it doesn't hurt to get the seed out there. I've been doing it for years, and it usually kickstarts my pastures in. Might take a year or two before it does, though. What was the other question?
I got a question for you, Steve. Have you ever mapped a pasture first and made like a prescription and saying like, okay, this area is really beat down, we need to make, and just fly that sections? Have you ever pre-done a prescription and then had them just spot seed on those spots?
Sort of, yeah. Like if there's an area that's worse, usually it's already fenced off differently, right? I'll fence off the tame from the native from everything else. Um, I seeded a ranch this past summer. It's a 9,000 acre ranch, and I seeded 1,200 acres of it. But the biggest field I seeded was 40 acres in size. Right? So it's just little open meadows and patches all over the place. So uh, that'd be almost impossible with a ground unit, right? It would take forever. Some of them I would actually fly up and fly a quarter of a mile from where I was and seed at 100 feet because there was too many trees and shrubs there. So, but yeah, there's sometimes when this area will do heavier. Normally it's just heavier. There's been a couple of times where I've talked to my seed guy and he helps me, and we seed the lowland different than the highland, right? So that's a different prescription depending on what we're doing. So yes, somewhat depends what my customer wants, right? I've seeded all my land now since the drought of 2021. Now I just play with it once in a while. If I get some new land, I'll seed it, but now I'm just mostly seeding for other people if they want.
Yeah, Steve, the question that we'd had from the chat was the best time of year, the seeding rate, and then what things to consider to increase the chances of getting an established seeding. So I think you got those all covered in there.
Yeah, seeding rate depends on what you're putting, usually between 5 and 10 pounds an acre if I'm just putting legumes on. As soon as you get a bunch of grasses, if you're throwing them in, then you're going to go higher because it's a lighter, fluffier. That's the other thing with the drone. It's such a small seed tank. I can't do big seeds or big fluffy seeds. I can't do oats or barley or peas or anything like that because it just, I'd fly 100 feet and I'd be out of seed because you got to put it on so heavy. So it's works really good for legumes or cover crops. I can do, but you have to make sure that it's not big seeds. So yeah, the size of that tank is definitely a restriction.
We've got a question back to you, Ryan, about 701. And 701 is a company that's got a couple of different products, one of which is the business management interface. They've got some software type program. Is that something that you utilize, or is yours strictly just the tags?
No, I don't utilize that. I know that I've had several one-on-one calls with them and them try to walk me through stuff. For me, again, it's how much time you want to put into it. I was really after those three things of what making sure they were in the fence, watching where the bulls were at, and just seeing how they were utilizing the grass. And so I haven't really dug into the business side of it because when I look into it, in my experience with all of that, especially business management, any kind of financial stuff, I'm a huge from my engineering background. I have all these crazy Excel spreadsheets that I made myself, so I could kind of dump it in there and get the same answers back. And it just takes a lot of time. Like I think that would take a lot of time, and I just don't know if I'm committed to that process yet. But one thing that I do think is interested is they have a wand. So when you run your cows through the chute, you can make, like if you're back pouring them, let's say, or giving them all the same vaccine, you can have a wand and scan them, and it will scan the cow that's in there, and log it into there, and you can make a tracking that way. I think if I do anything, that will probably be my next thing utilizing them. But again, I'll have to get my whole herd up to them and utilize it on my whole herd. I don't know if I'm there yet. But yeah, I think you can get a really lot out of it. It's kind of one of them things I think you get out of it what you put into it, and I'm just limiting what I'm putting into it right now.
So both of you mentioned labor and the folks that you have working with you. And so when we talk about the workforce in agriculture and how we implement technology into that, I see it in two different directions. One is that, like you alluded to, Ryan, you can be away from the place, but still have a touch point to what's going on and a sense of, I don't know if it's control or lack of control when your cows are 7 miles away from where they should be, but you have a sense of what's going on. And then also the worker that we're looking for now is also potentially somebody that I think you alluded to, Steve, that flying a drone is kind of like a video game. All of a sudden, we've got these different positions in agriculture that are not just pounding a post anymore. I mean, these are much more sophisticated type positions. And so, Ryan, I'll start with you. How do you look at technology and labor as being related? And I mean, pros and cons of that together.
It's a fine dance, right? Like I have some guys that I really take well to the technology, and then I've had guys that are literally the righty tighty, lefty loosey. That's where we start. Um, and so it is based on who you're dealing with. For me, the technology side of it is going back to my Army background is I'm trying to get all my technology in the same suite so that whether I training them on one piece of equipment, it cross levels to the next piece, and I don't have to reteach them over and over again. And so on the cattle side, I mean, I'm trying to teach them, safe handling techniques, pressure on, pressure off. And that stuff is tough because it takes a lot of finesse. And I don't know if you'll get past that with technology. For example, I used a bud box the first couple of years that I was doing working cows. Worked great as long as myself or Renus, the kid who's worked for me a long time, were in there. But once we got out, the system failed. And so then this last year, I bought a bud tub flow because it's kind of the same concept, but it has a crowding pen. And so I could put anybody on that realistically, and I did, and it worked fine. So I think it's really a matter of knowing who you have and what you think they're going to be able to handle, because it's the gamut of what somebody can handle on technology.
Yeah, and same question to you, Steve. Talk about that balance between the labor and the technology and training and oversight. I mean, it's a back and forth.
Yeah, for me, it's hard to find good help. So I'm trying to simplify things as much as I can. Um, the other technology that I do use is trail cams for all my water sites, right? Knowing that water site is still up and running is great. I can see that from my phone. I'm trying to build my system that, a 12-year-old could run it, right? We've got I started out with all temporary fencing and all temporary water systems, and everything moved with the herds, right? So as I'm, my business is growing, I want more permanent water sites, more permanent fences, more permanent, things that are working and that, a 12-year-old could go out and open a gate and move the cows through for me. Because that's, I could hire a 25-year-old and they have the 12-year-old mentality basically, right? Like they just can't, they don't understand how to work even. So, yeah, trying to get things simple so that I don't have to have a bunch of hired people around to be able to do that, because it's just hard to get them. That being said, I would like to get the virtual collars as well. But I want them for my sheep. As a custom grazer, my customers are not going to be happy, right? Their yearlings come in, I put them in a chute, put collars on them, all that extra processing. We're losing gains. And then they're gone. And there's or even custom cows that I bring in, right? They come in and then they leave. Like I don't have them here year round. So I don't see the value in it for me. But on my sheep herd, because they're ours, definitely I would like to get them. However, in Canada, no company yet has collars for sheep. So I can't. I actually heard about this technology 25 years ago in Saskatoon at a conference. I was just young, just getting going, and I was so excited about collars, fence collar or GPS collars. And I was still waiting for them like a year ago. Right? They still haven't been here, but they were talking about them way back then. And one of the things that was interesting about it, a lot of guys are doing it. Up here, a lot of people are going into them with funding programs, right? So they get, 70% of them paid for or something. My question is it worth it without funding? Would you still do it? Is it still worth that labor? Because I remember going to a dairy farm one time. They were showing a new robotic milking system. And I'm like, that's pretty cool, pretty fancy, like really high tech. And the guy beside me, just conversation with a guy beside me, he says, "Yeah, we got a dairy at home, and we did this 10 years ago, and we went away from it." I'm like, "Oh, why? Well, why is that? That's kind of strange." He said, "Well, what it did was it saved on our $20 an hour work, but all of a sudden we had $300 an hour work." Right? All of a sudden, when your computer broke down, you had to hire a tech in to fix it. He said our labor ended up getting higher, so we stopped doing it. So I don't know, I haven't done the collars yet, but I'm wondering with all the costs that are involved in it, is it cheaper to hire that 12-year-old to go out and move my fence after too? So, but I do want to try it with my sheep. They're the ones that like to jump through fences, so I'd like to have the fence right on their neck. That'd be a big benefit, I think. So I will try it. I will get them, but I haven't been able to yet.
So we were just at a workshop on Tuesday that our local county extension office put on, and it was about integrating sheep and or goats into your operation alongside cattle. And the number one thing that people would always have a reservation about was in adding fencing. You know, it's so expensive to add fencing, plus more intense fencing when you're talking about sheep or goats. And so that became part of the conversation. We didn't broach it as far as virtual colors for goats, but they were talking about it as a possibility stateside for sheep, but saying that you had to have them shorn multiple times around the neck so that that would have that point of contact.
Yeah, I'm lucky I have hair sheep, so they basically look like goats, so I should be good.
Gotcha.
We just need a company that'll actually get them here. So
Well, I've got, yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I got one thing, talking about the technology side that I wanted to express is when we look at technology, I'm looking forward to what's going to come down the pipeline. And one thing that I see in my mind, and one reason why I'm trying to push on seeing how I can track my animals, especially with that heat map, is as we move into maybe which could be the next frontier is the carbon credits and how much carbon we're going to capture and how to quantify that. I think that's going to be a big source is how do they quantify it? How do they track it? Because it's one thing to say, well, I'm doing rotational grazing and here's my log. But it's another thing to say, well, here's all my GPS data and what's that worth? And I'll sell it to you and you're going to compensate me for the work I've done. So that kind of to me is one of maybe the fourth reason I have it is because I'm not quite sure where that's going to end up or how that's going to develop. And I wish I had a crystal ball to say, hey, yeah, this is going to be the way it is. I don't, but I kind of got that itchy feeling like somebody's going to have to quantify it and they're going to want to use data. And that's the kind of information I'm wondering how do I get ready for it, right? How do I get ready? How do I get my feet into the water and get some access to it?
It seems you've
Ryan,
excited Steve.
that's my next drone, Ryan. It's my next drone. I want to be able to read carbon with it. There's actually a drone. I've been looking into them. There's a drone that you can get right now that he said, yeah, this is the next thing that's probably going to be big, is you can read the terrain of the land, whether it's got swamp on it or bushes, right? Trees. You can read it. And I said, well, what's the purpose of that? He said, well, most people so you can clear land. I'm like, ooh, well, that's probably not very regenerative, right? I'm not going to be bulldozing trees. But to be able to drain land or to clear land is what these things can do. So they're measuring the land already. I'm waiting for the one that comes out and measures carbon, right? You can all of a sudden you can read your whole land just by flying a drone over it. So yeah, I'm with you.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's going to be the next technology thing. And how do we prepare for it? It's kind of like my sprayer thing. My example of that sprayer is, do you want to be on the front end of it so you capture it right away? Or do you want to be on the back end of it and have it be tried and true and say, okay, this is a safe bit? My experience is the ones at the front take a lot of bumps and bruises, but sometimes capture a little bit more of the revenue. So that's kind of where I want to be at.
Well, we did have one more just very specific question for you, Steve, before I let you guys go tonight, and that is, what is the optimum height to width to seed at?
Okay. So I've never actually put out tarps and measured it or whatever. Usually I just let the drone fly over me and I stand and then see if I'm 16 feet off the side of it and I get hit with seed. That's about how fancy I am for that. So ideally, if I've got a nice flat field, I'll fly at about 10 to 12 feet. And I do a 16 to a 20, 21, depending on the rate of, if I need a higher rate, you go narrower, right? So depending on the rate, but usually that's what I'm flying if I've got flat land. Very seldom do I actually have nice flat land to seed on. The reason I'm there is because it's rough terrain and it's hard. So in that case, if I've got shrubs and brushes and log piles or you name it, what's out in a pasture, then I'm usually flying 20 feet or more. And like I said, at that one ranch, I was taking off from an oil lease and going a quarter of a mile over and flying over top of a little opening, I'm flying at 100 feet because I can't see what's over there. I want to be above the trees. And as long as it's not windy, those legumes are dropping pretty. They're heavy, dense legumes, so they're dropping pretty straight. But yeah, ideally would be great, but very seldom do I have ideal conditions. So.
And I know you said that you can only go for 8 minutes on your battery, so you're not letting this thing get really far away from you. But how far away can it get for you to still have Sally in control of Sam?
Yes. I've gone the length of a quarter. More. There is a limit. I got to one point where I'm in between fields. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll instead of packing Sam up and putting him in the truck and driving over to the field, I'll cheat and I'll fly him partway over, and then I'll drive to where I got to go. So land him, then I'll drive to where I got to go, and then I'll fly him again to where I'm at. It's easier to fly him there than to carry him there. But occasionally I've gone a little too far doing that, and it'll stop me. I can't remember how the distance, but it'll say, no, too far away, and he won't go any further. So, yeah, it's risky though, because that too is how I've crashed him once or twice. get too far away and he can't get back. And yeah, the blades are $85 a piece, I found out. So a few times.
And that does it for this first session of the 2026 Rural Resilience Webinar Series. If you are watching this relatively close to the release date, still coming up this year, we've got Ranch Health Cattle Vaccination Best Practices. That webinar coming up the evening of February 5th. On February 19th, Ranch Water, Low-Tech, High-Impact Restoration. And out to March 5th, Ranch Insights, Sheep Industry Takeaways for Beef. You can take part live by registering on our website, ranchstewards.org/events. Last but not least, thank you to Matt and to Steve for being our presenters tonight. If ranching, conservation, and strong communities matter to you, you are in the right place. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and be part of a winning team for agriculture and working lands.